Yo, dudes.
Roma.
It's pretty chill. Maybe you could, join it or something.
Hello everyone, welcome to my video on what sets Catholicism apart regarding worship. I'm specifically talking about the Mass here and the Novus Ordo, though much of this applies to the traditional Latin Mass as well. And this is, of course, the third part in a series I'm doing on why Catholicism is what sets Catholicism apart from the other branches of Christianity. Please do watch the first two videos. They're the two most recent videos before this one on my channel. Anyway, so I've got four categories here that I came up with off the top of my head. So incense and vestments, consecration of the Eucharist, music, and organised prayer and liturgy. So incense and vestments, this is a very quick part. There are just two Bible passages here that I've chosen. That I could have chosen quite a lot of Leviticus and quite a lot of Exodus for either of these things, but I thought I'd choose two very short verses here that show how the Catholic Church aims to continue the traditions and such that are found in the Israelite worship. So we have Leviticus 16:13, and he shall put incense on the fire before the Lord. This is one of the many examples in Leviticus where incense and the burning of things is used in order to worship God. There are also many things like burning offerings and such. And so the use of incense is a continuation that the Catholic Church has incorporated into its tradition, as continuation of that Israelite worship. And we have in Exodus 28:2, you shall make sacred vestments for the glorious adornment of your brother Aaron. Now, this is right before, I think, in Exodus 28, where the instructions are given on how exactly the vestments should be constructed, and it speaks about purple and scarlet stuff and things. It's talking about thread and various jewels and such. Obviously, the vestments are not the same as what were used by the Israelites, as a lot of the traditions from the Israelites have been completed and fulfilled in the New Testament, as so says Christian theology. But we still keep our priesthood separated from the laity via garments, which is what is being instructed there by God in Exodus. And we still dress them in certain ways to symbolize certain things. So in that way, it's a continuation of the Israelite worship there also. And that will be the same for every Mass, every Catholic Mass that you go to for both of those. The next thing is the consecration. So I've spoken about this a lot in pretty much every one of my videos. But what separates Catholicism specifically from Protestantism is the consecration of the Eucharist. So this is where a priest will say a prayer over the bread and the wine, and that's when it becomes the body and the blood. So this is the part where the miracle takes place, wherein Christ is physically present within the church, within the house of God, and then you're all called to eat the body and, in certain circumstances, drink the blood as well. In the modern day, it's common for, at least in the Novus Ordo, for the laity to administer the body and the blood alongside the priest, though in a traditional Latin Mass, it will only ever be the priest, and you have to receive the Eucharist kneeling. And usually, unless it's a wedding or a special occasion, the blood is off limits to the laity, and the priest drinks on behalf. That's a tradition that has come about, I believe, for practical reasons, because not everywhere around the world can have wine on hand, whereas bread is more readily available. And so I think that's what's informed that tradition there. But of course, as we know, as we are taught as Catholics, the Eucharist, either body or blood, is fully sufficient whether you have it under one kind or both kinds. And of course, the priest is drinking the blood on behalf of the laity as well. So that will happen at every Catholic Mass. If there is no consecration of the Eucharist, then there is no Mass, effectively. If it was just all the prayers and such, it would be no different to any group prayer session, just with perhaps more tradition. But it's the actual consecration of the Eucharist that makes a Mass a proper Mass, whether it's a high Mass or a low Mass, whether it's a sung Mass or a spoken Mass, whether it's a vigil, there will always be a consecration of the Eucharist. Music. So I just spoke about a sung Mass, so this is quite a good segue that I'm going to pretend was intentional. But in terms of music, for the traditional Latin Mass, it's a little different to the Novus Ordo. The Novus Ordo, since Vatican II, when the Novus Ordo was implemented, more contemporary, more modern instruments can now be used in worship, but the bishop must give approval for the instruments. It's not any instrument or any time, let's say the organ isn't working, so someone brings a guitar. You can't exactly do that. You still have to get permission from your bishop. The only time I've ever seen say an acoustic guitar used in Catholic Mass is when I was up in Scotland, and there just wasn't an organ in this church, as it was a very small church, and there were only maybe a couple dozen people in there, and so a dispensation was given for the music to be recited on a guitar rather than on a keyed instrument like an organ. But for the most part, you will hear Gregorian chant, or at least you'll hear a choir, which is very common in all Catholic masses. There's usually a choir, unless of course it is a random church up in Scotland that doesn't have perhaps a lot of money at its disposal. But 9 times out of 10 you'll have a choir and you'll have an organ, and that has been the case for many, many centuries. And finally we have organised prayer and liturgy, so I'll just read out what I've got written here. During Mass, the faithful sing hymns and recite prayers like the Our Father and the Hail Mary. I'll say something about the Our Father in a second because it's different to how the Protestants say it, along with the creed and scripted responses. Responses like if the priest says, "The Lord be with you," then you respond with, "and with your spirit," for example. There are numerous other examples as well related to the Our Father, but I'll say that once I've finished reading here. So this format unifies the laity and preserves tradition. Now, there are certain things that the laity are required to do if they are present in order for the Mass to go smoothly, and that involves responses, and that involves usually the singing of hymns, but specifically it involves prayer. So with the Our Father, Protestants, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Protestants, but Protestants say at the end of the Our Father, or what the Catholics would call the Our Father, they say, "For the kingdom, power and glory are yours now and forever." And that's how the Protestant Our Father ends. Now, Catholics don't say that bit in the Our Father, but we do say it in the Mass before the priest says the prayer of consecration. And so it is usually the laity that actually say that bit out loud in between 2 scripted sequences that the priest says. So if you're part of the laity, then you would say the Our Father, you join in with the priest in saying the Our Father in the Novus Ordo anyway. Most prayer in the traditional Latin Mass is actually just the priest on his own, and often, or at least sometimes, the priest will whisper the prayers, in fact, because they don't require a response from the laity, and the prayer is supposed to be to God, not to the laity. So I'm sure there are a lot of hardcore traditional Latin Mass Catholics that will say that yes, that's the correct way of doing it. Personally, I could go either way. I've only ever been to a Novus Ordo Mass, but I am going to be going to a traditional Latin Mass soon, so perhaps I will be trad-pilled in my next video, and I will say, in fact, yes, that's the perfect way of doing it, but I digress. So that ending for the Protestant Our Father is put just before the priest consecrates the Eucharist, and then there are a few more call and response type prayers. There's also the responsorial psalm, and also each of the readings and each of those prayers and such will be said the same for any given Mass on any given day around the world for the Novus Ordo and for the traditional Latin Mass. So the Novus Ordo has a 3-year revolving calendar where a large portion of the Bible is read out through readings each week. And the traditional Latin Mass, I believe, has a 1-year revolving calendar. And so if you go, say, this Sunday to a Catholic church in, let's say, Paris, and a friend of yours goes to one in Japan, for example, the same readings will be read out. If you both go to a Novus Ordo, the same readings will be read out, and the Mass will follow the exact same structure, so long as the priests are actually saying it properly. The only thing I don't think is standardized is which hymns are sung. I think that's up to the choir and the priest. And of course, people can put in different personal intentions to be read out at the beginning of the Mass. So if someone has sadly passed away, then it's usually their intentions that will be read out if a friend of theirs has asked the priest to mention it before the Mass. But the actual structure of the Mass and the readings will be the same all over the world on any given day. Anyway, that's all I've got for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If there's anything that you think I should have mentioned, please let me know in the comments, and also if there's anything you want me to cover in my next video on what separates Catholicism from the other branches of Christianity, let me know. I'm up for any sort of topic. I might do one on the sacraments, and then I can send it to all my ortho-bro friends, and we can agree on something for once, so that'll be fun. But do let me know if there's anything you want me to cover in the next video, or if there's anything that I got wrong in this video, because of course I am one guy and I don't script these videos, which you can probably tell. So if I've got anything wrong or if I've misspoken, please do let me know. And also like and subscribe, and also God bless. Have a blessed day.